Right, hello and welcome. I'm trying to see. I've never done one of these before, so I don't know when people arrive how I know who you are or anything like that, so you'll have to bear with me. Feel free to make any comments if you've got any questions during it, during the bat walk. Just pop them in the comments and I'll try and answer them either at that time or if it's something I'm going to cover later. So it's just after 6:30, so it's just starting to get a wee bit sort of darker here. So it's still quite daylight. So what I'll do is I'm going to talk about, the way I normally do bat walks in person, I'm going to do it tonight as well, is just talk a bit about bats and answer any questions people have with bats, and then once the bats appear I'll just let you listen to them on the bat detector and also explain a bit about bat detectors as well. So where I am just now is Denham. Let me just see if I can turn this round. So that's the village up that way. This is actually a really good bit for bats. I suspect it's actually the glass recycling here, that basically people bring it along. There's alcohol and soft drinks and that, and all the sugar attracts lots of insects, therefore it attracts lots of bats. And down there is the River Teviot. Depending on how things go, we might end up down there later. I'm hoping you're able to hear me okay. If you can, I was going to say if you can't hear me, mention the comments. If you can hear me, just drop me a comment just to make sure that I'm not just talking to myself. So I'll turn back this way. Right, I'm going to put my reputation on the line and say we're definitely going to see a bat tonight. I'm going to sort of say no matter what, we will see a bat. So bats, there is 1,450-ish species in the world. New ones have been found all the time. And in the UK, depending on the book you're reading and the website you're looking at, it could be anything between 15 and 20 species, it will say. So the reason that is basically they're finding out stuff all the time about bats. There's one book I've got written in the late 80s, and it says there's only 15 species in the UK. I've got another leaflet, a sort of fold out leaflet, which I highly recommend you get, which is the Guide to British Bats. It's the Field Studies Council. It's a fold out guide and it costs £3.50. I'm not on commission, by the way, but on the back it's also got a bit about their calls and their frequencies and peak frequencies. £3.30 won't break the bank either, but this one here has 16 species on it, and that's because it was published in 2001, when up until that point it had been 17 species known, but then one went extinct, was declared extinct in the 1990s. However, not long after that was published, one lone male, the greater mouse-eared bat, turned up in the south of England, and he's still turning up in hibernation sites. So he's an old man now, and if he's the only one around and there's no females, then they're going to be extinct again very soon. However, we don't know. Maybe there is some females, maybe there's a small breeding sort of population down there. We don't know. We'll maybe find out in the coming years. So that took us back up to 17, and there's another species that's since been found to definitely be breeding in the UK, and there's another couple that may be breeding. They may be vagrants, migrants that come across, but they may be breeding here. So that takes us up to about 20 species. Where I'm in the Scottish borders here. This is Denham. I'm doing this from, and there's probably about 10 species in Scotland, but I'm not going to sort of say that for definite, because we're finding new species and sort of moving further north, not just of bats but of all species. all the time. And the most common species up here is the soprano pipistrelle. Now, it's actually quite an interesting species from my point of view, because if I was doing this talk 25 years ago, I'd only be talking about the common pipistrelle. But in the 1990s, they decided that actually there isn't just a common pipistrelle, there's common and another species. And it was only this century that it actually got its scientific name. In fact, sort of like about in the 1990s, when I first started doing bat walks, there was only I'm trying to think, 950 I think species of bats, sort of about 1998, 99, and now I'm saying there's 1450, so that's 500 increase. So that's actually about a third more have been discovered this century alone. So as I say, we're finding new stuff out all the time. So soprano pipistrelle is not the most common further south though. The most common further south in the UK is the common pipistrelle. For some reason, about halfway up, it sort of flips over. So about 75% of the pipistrelles are common down south, 25 are soprano. This far north, it swaps the other way, 75% are soprano, 25% are common. Not 100% sure why. Common don't seem to like the damp as much, and the sort of like that. And one thing that sort of like we get up this far north is dampness. There is another pipistrelle, the enthusiast, but I'm just pretending it isn't existing, because it is less than 1%, makes up less than 1% of the pipistrelles. Now, just at the start, I did guarantee we're going to see a bat tonight, and I don't think I specified that it was live, did I? So here is a soprano pipistrelle bat. I'm just trying to get it so that the light isn't shining on it. So this is a soprano pipistrelle bat. The soprano pipistrelle is the smallest bat in the UK. Now, when I say it's the smallest bat compared to the common, there's about 1 millimetre in it. Weighs about the same as a 2p piece, and it's thought this guy's actually a male. It wouldn't be one of these because they're a bit lazy. Male bats are actually quite lazy. But a female soprano pipistrelle is said to eat 3,000 midges in one night, and that, in my opinion, is the unofficial reason they're protected. I'll get onto the official reason in a minute, but the unofficial reason, as I say, that they're protected is because they eat midges. If you've ever been to the Highlands of Scotland and experienced the Highland midge, you'll know that it's not pleasant. But a Highland midge is just the same as the midge that we find throughout the rest of the UK. It's not a different species. It's just that further north you go, the less bats there are. If you want, if you weren't loving bats before, you should love them because they eat midges. So the soprano is bat we're most likely to see here tonight. Another bat we might see or hear is the nocturnal bat. It's the biggest bat. We're going from the smallest bat to the biggest bat. It's the biggest bat in the UK, and it's also the loudest. Its call is actually louder than a rock concert. It's just slightly outside our range of hearing, and it also is quite a slow, high flying bat. It flies quite slowly, and then when it gets to its feeding site, it dips down and dips back up, and then eats and dips down and dips back up. You might have even seen one flying just as it's starting to get dark, and think, oh, there's a bird flying back to its nighttime roost or whatever, because it's about the size. It might look a bit the size of a starling or a blackbird. It's quite, and as I say, it's quite slow moving, so it does look just like a bird, but it's not. It's a bat, and they'll travel tens of kilometres to find their food. So that's us. We've done the pipistrelles and that. Now all the bats in the UK eat insects apart from a couple, and that's the long-eareds. The long-eareds have quite broad wings, which means they're quite manoeuvrable. So occasionally they use their ears to hunt. They don't echolocate that much, they just listen out for noises, and they can actually hear the feet of a spider on a leaf, and the bat comes in, hovers, picks the spider off, takes it away and eats it. Now, it's only very occasionally they eat spiders. Their favourite food is moths. Now, I'm not talking about small moths, I'm talking about big ones. They love large yellow underwing, for instance, which is one of the most common moths around for most of the year. So, big moth flying about, and some moths can hear quite well, so they hear the bat's echolocation. So, bats come in, moth's flying along, hears the bat, stops flying, drops to the ground, bat flies over, moth takes off. It's escaped, except if it's a brown long-eared, which is echolocating very quietly. So the bat flies in, the moth doesn't hear it, and the bat catches it. It listens for the wing beats of the moth. However, it's then got a problem. You saw the size of the pipistrelle, the brown long-eared's not much bigger. Midge in the mouth of a pipistrelle, chomp chomp, swallow, it's gone. You've got a big moth. It's quite difficult. So what the brown long-eared does is it goes and hangs up in a tree or in a building somewhere, and it rips off one of the wings, because wings are not very nutritious. And then it starts to chomp down the body, and it eats all the body, and then it throws away the wing that's left, and quite often the head's attached to it. So if you find a lot of wings, moth wings in the ground, underneath a tree or a building, you can actually say there was a brown long-eared bat up there, unless you're down the very sort of southwest of the UK. Potentially it could be a grey long-eared, but they're very rare bat. So the other bat that's quite common around the place that you might see is the Benton Bat, and it's the one bat that you can say without a doubt what species it is without having to use a bat detector to listen to its call. If you see a bat flying about over the surface like that of a river or a lake or a loch or a big pond, then that's a Benton. However, if you see a bat fly once across, all you can say is it's a bat, and the reason for that is that's how they drink. All bats drink the same. They fly, open their mouth, scoop up a mouthful of water, and fly off. But the Bentons hunt over water, and they'll actually pick up and use their back legs and the sort of like the flap between the legs and the tail to pick up insects that are actually on the surface of the water and bring them up and eat them. So that's the Benton bat. So you can. I was going to say we might see them later on. I don't think we're going to be on here long enough, and also it's probably going to be too dark, and even with a strong torch I don't think you'll see it. So that's the bats. There are other bats in the world though. There's several there's several other preys, not just insects. Some bats eat fruit. In fact, the biggest fruit bat, I'm about 6'1", biggest fruit bat is probably, its wingspan is probably just wider than I am tall, so it's a massive bat. So they're fruit bats. There's other nectar-eating bats as well. That's the vegetarian ones out the way. Then we've got other bats that I've just realised I'm going to be looking up for bats, and it's probably not the nicest of views for you on this live, sorry about that. So yes, so they also eat, there's bats that eat small mammals, including other bats. Some bats eat other bats, and people go, that's a bit strange, but if you think about it, sparrowhawks eat other birds, so it's just exactly the same as that. And you've got reptiles, amphibians, fish, birds. Trying to think what else. Oh, of course, blood. There's vampire bats. There's 3 species of vampire bats in Central America and South America. Now, I really like vampire bats because they're quite cool, because of the way they behave. They, rather than expelling a lot of energy to feed on a high value food, they actually go after blood, which is quite low value. But they don't need to expend a lot of energy on it. All they've got to do is find a big animal that they can land on, little nip, and they've got an anticoagulant in their blood which stops the blood clotting, so the blood just keeps on, just a wee nip, and it just keeps on coming out. It doesn't gush out, it just sort of gently comes out. It's like you getting a wee cut in your finger that just won't stop bleeding. That's link clot. That's what they do. So they start drinking then. So they're not spending a lot of energy. All they've got to do is sit and drink. But blood isn't very nutritious, which means they've got to drink a lot. They've got to drink about a tablespoonful or so of it. Now that's a lot of liquid for a small bat, because they're quite a small bat, the vampire bats. So that means they've got to do something almost straight away. They need to start peeing. If they didn't pee, they would end up too heavy, and if a predator came along, they wouldn't be able to fly. So they have to pee straight away, and for that reason they never hang upside down to eat. If you think about it, it wouldn't be a good idea to be hanging upside down and peeing as you're eating. Not a good move. So that's actually really interesting, but that's not what makes vampire bats so cool. Bats are quite social creatures in general, and the vampire bat is no exception. So once it pees out almost the liquid, it's got a really thick, gloopy blood mixture in its tummy, and it goes back to its roost, and its friend hasn't found anything to eat that night. So what does it do? Throws up some of the blood and lets its friend eat some. Now that is friendship. So so that's the vampire bats. But getting back to the bats in this country, at this time of year, they're going out, and the males have been hanging out, usually with another male, because as I say, they're social creatures, bats. So they've been hanging. But then they've split up. They've been to set up their own little bachelor pad on their own, and they've decided that they're going to go and find some mate. It's time to breed. So they go out and they sing a song and they attract a few females into the little bachelor pad, and they mate with them. After a few days they throw them out. They go out again, sing again another song, get a few more females in, mate with them. After a few days chuck them out, and this goes on for several weeks. So the females have mated over several weeks. However, they're not pregnant yet. They all go away and hibernate. Come sort of like October, November time. It depends when it gets really quite cold, and also what species they are. Usually by the end of September they're starting to think about hibernation, but some of the bats can hang about till November before they go to hibernate. So they go into hibernation, and then in the spring they can come out. Depending on the species, they'll either come out in sort of February, March time, maybe into April. Occasionally you'll see a day-flying bat during the winter, and that's because one will have been roused from hibernation, a bit peckish, and it will want to go out and have a feed. If it's going to find any food at all during winter, it's going to be during the hottest part of the day, warmest part of the day. So that's between 12 and 2, so that's when you'll see day-flying bats. Usually, although occasionally you'll still see them sort of like quite late into spring, if it's been a very poor spring, and sort of wet nights, you need to come out during the day to feed. So in the spring, the males, they'll hook up with their friends and just hang out for this, and basically their summer consists of getting up at dusk, going out, feeding for an hour, literally going and find somewhere to hang out, sleep, and then about an hour before sunrise, get up again, feed some more, and then go back to bed. Females, on the other hand, they're feeding all the time. They gather together in a maternity roost, and this is where the soprano pipistrelles, especially eating midges, is really important. Common pipistrelles, a big roost for them is 300 bats, but a big maternity roost of soprano pipistrelles is 3,000. That's the biggest one that's been recorded. And if you remember, I said they can eat up to 3,000 midges in one night. 3,000 bats eating 3,000 midges is 9 million midges potentially from one roost alone. And as I say, this is why they're unofficial reason why they're protected. Excuse me, something's just crawling up. A spider's just crawling up my hand. So They form a roost. Now, something like a brown long-eared bat, 40 to 50 is actually a big roost for them. So it just depends on the species how big the roost is. But the females all gather together, and when there's enough food, they decide to become pregnant, and they all give birth roughly within a day or so of each other, even though they all could have mated weeks apart the previous year. So they've mated, and they give birth, and they give birth once, and that's it, to one pup, maybe twins, but that's quite rare. But it's only once, and this is the official reason they're protected. Something small, like a mouse, can have dozens of young in a year. Bats can have one, maybe two if they have twins, but that's it. They only give birth once a year, so their population can plummet quite fast and take a long time to recover. Whereas mice, yes, they can plummet quite fast, but they can recover really quickly and get back up. So it's really important and this is why they're protected. Protection of bats does not mean that if you've got a bat roost you can't do anything. All it means is that there's certain rules and laws you have to follow. So it's if you have a bat roost in your house and you want to do any work that you think might disturb them, just contact the relevant people and see what's needs to be done. Nature Scotland, formerly SNH, Scottish Natural Heritage, will be able to help out, and there's plenty of ecologists and bat groups around as well that will help and give advice. And also the Bat Conservation Trust, of course. Now, if you've got bats, you may not even know. What you need to do is look and see. There's a couple of ways. One is if you see them exiting your house, but sometimes that can be quite hard because they all come out one at a time. So it can be a couple of minutes between each one. However, if you've got maternity roost, before dawn, before sunrise, they'll gather in a swarm outside and they'll go in at once. And the reason for that is the safety in numbers. So in case there's a predator in that roost that's got itself in there, you don't want to they don't want to be picked off one at a time. So they all go in en masse. A few of them might not make it, but most of them will turn tail and they'll go to another roost. But the other thing is that they poo a lot, so sometimes outside a roost there'll be a lot of poo. Now, bat poo looks quite like mouse poo, but there's one big difference. Mouse poo when it's fresh is nice and squidgy, but once it dries it's rock hard. Bat poo, on the other hand, crumbles. And that's because it's all the chitin, the exoskeleton of the insects on the outside that basically they poo out. It's digested all the juicy bits, so you can crumble them. So that's how to tell if you've got bats. If you find a grounded bat, phone the Bat Conservation Trust. But if you have concerns about the safety of the bat, just lift it up using a pair of gloves or a tea towel or something like that. Put it in a box with some air holes. Make sure that the lid's untight and the air holes are quite small because bats are great escape artists. Put in a little milk bottle tub at the top of water in there, so it's got something to drink, and that's it. Just don't worry about food. Dehydration's a major issue. They can survive without food for quite a while. I regularly take bats into care. Sometimes they've been stuck inside somewhere. Other times I've got one in care at the moment which has been catted. Basically a cat's got it, damaged its wings, it's got some slight tears in it, and also a broken bone in its finger. I'm hopeful that she'll be flying, but I think she's been a bit too well fed and she's put on quite a bit of weight, and I think she might be too heavy now, even if her wings have healed. So I've got her on a strict diet, so I'm hoping to get her away and hibernating before the winter joy sets in. If not, I'll be having to keep her over winter. So if you find one, that's what to do, and call the Bat Conservation Trust helpline as well. It's open during the day, in evenings and weekends it's manned by volunteers, and you can never, you know, sort of like sometimes you can't get through if they haven't got the volunteers, unfortunately. So it's just starting to get quiet here. There's some gulls and some corvids heading back to their roosts for the night, which is always a good sign that hopefully the bats will be out soon. So I'm going to show you how to use a bat detector. So I'm going to flip the camera around. This is a Magenta Bat 4 bat detector. I would say it's the best bat detector for the price. It's £60 to £65. Yeah, the only cheaper one you'll get actually that I think is on the market is a DIY one where you've got to build it yourself. Whereas this is the cheapest one. There are slightly dearer ones, but I don't think you get a lot more for your money. So bat detector, it's kind of like, I'm showing my age here, an old FM radio, and you use it to tune in. So you click it on there and turn it up to hear static, and you set it to 50. Now I'm going to switch it off in a second, but just so you can hear the static, it picks up lots of different noises. That's that's actually phone, that was my fingers, but also that's my nose. Your sound's just as bad. So I'm going to turn it off now so that you're not getting deafened by that noise. So set it to 50. Most British bat species you'll hear at 50, even a nocturnal which is down at 20, you'll still hear them quietly at 50, and you can turn it down to 20 if there's one going over. Now, if you've got it at 50, the two most likely ones you're going to hear is the soprano and the common pipistrelle. Now, the soprano pipistrelle, I said it gets a scientific name in sort of this century. Its scientific name is Pipistrellus pygmaeus, and the common pipistrelle is Pipistrellus pipistrellus. That tells you two things. One is the names tell you two things. One is the Pipistrellus pygmaeus tells you it's smaller. Now, as I say, it's just about a millimetre smaller, so you can't really see in the hand, but it is slightly smaller. And the soprano pipistrelle, now the common and the soprano, one of them is at 45 kilohertz and one's at a higher frequency of 55. Which one's at a higher frequency? The soprano, its common name lets you know which one it is. So the common down about 45, you'll hear it, and the soprano up at 55. However, as I say, it's like tuning into an old FM radio. You'll hear them at 50. So both at 50. So you then you'll hear them, and then you tune in, and it doesn't matter which way you go. If you turn up to 55 and it becomes loud and clear, you know it's the soprano. If it becomes a bit high pitched and tinny, you've went the wrong way, it's the common. And the same the other way, turn it down to 45, loud and clear, it's the common, high pitched and tinny, it's the soprano. So other ones down about 40 kilohertz, you would also hear the brown long-eared. Now, I said the brown long-eared bat was a quiet bat. If I was standing roughly here, that tree there, the brown long-eared would have to be about there for me to hear it. That's how quiet it is. Whereas that tree sort of over there, the nocturnal could probably be flying the other side of that tree and I would still hear it, because remember I said it's one of the loudest bat sounds around. So pipistrelles are sort of like in between. I've had pipistrelles round here flying up the top of that tree there. I don't know whether you can also see, there is actually lots of insects flying about here, and I'm starting to get bitten. What I do for my love of bats. So yes, so there's the pipistrelles. You'll hear them. They don't have to be that close to be here to hear them. So if you're going to get a bat detector, I would always recommend getting the Magenta Bat 4. However, there is a Bat 5 which is about £30 dearer, about £19.95, and there is a big digital display rather than an analogue sort of dial here. It's a big digital display, and it's great if you have eyesight problems. So if you've got problems with your eyes and you might struggle to read this, spend the extra £30, it's worth it, in my opinion. If you don't have problems with your eyes, you're paying for not a lot extra other than a big fancy screen, which also is just something else to go wrong, because basically it's the same bat detector as this, but with a big screen. So it's not one I would recommend. So as I say, around here, this is a really nice area, because around here we've got lots of trees, and pipistrelles like habitat edges. The books will tell you they don't fly across open ground. They do, because bats don't read, like most wildlife, bats don't read the books we write about them. But if you're wanting to look at watch bats, what to do is, there's a big bit of tree here, is stick yourself under a tree so you've got as much sky as possible. Because if you sort of stick yourself over here and you're looking up at these trees, if you've got bats flying about in front of you, you're going to struggle to see them. And that's why one of the reasons for that is, there's a couple of reasons. One is the bats are flying close to the trees, and they also fly quite close to stone structures, because that's where the insects are. The insects are living in the trees, and they're also on the sort of stone buildings, because the buildings have taken in heat during the day, and stone structures, and then at night they give out that heat, which attracts insects which are cold-blooded. So, and other things that attract insects, such as bottle banks. But the other reason why, if you've got a bat flying in front of here, and it's quite hard to see, but if it flew out in the open it would be easier to see. If you've got a predator that's on the wing, bats will be out soon. Sparrowhawks are still still active at this time of day, so it's a big risk to go out into the open. But if they're against here, it's harder for them to see, birds of prey to see. Just as it's getting dark, and this is one of the reasons why they fly at night. Just as it's getting dark, the sparrowhawks might get them, but during the night, owls prey on them, and other things that get them. I've mentioned cats, unfortunately, also sort of catch bats as they usually sort of either as they're coming out the roost, or they'll just catch them, sort of flip them out of the air, and then play with them. They rarely eat them, they just play with them and usually tear the wings. But unfortunately, if they bite into them, but cats have a lot of bacteria in their mouth, and the bats often get infection, which is a bit of a shame, and so they've got to be treated with antibiotics, sometimes, as well as just being given time for the tears in the wings. And the tears in the wings will skin, so there will be white scar tissue, and even a big hole will actually reduce in size. So Chonky that I've got back, she had 4 or 5 reasonable sized holes, but they're actually quite small now. So anyway, other predators they've got, I've just heard, I think that was a rook calling there. Rooks, crows, magpies, all the corvids, they will also prey on them. They'll wait outside a roost and pick them off one at a time. There's actually, it's not a very nice video, but there is a video, I think it was in Spain, of a magpie actually sitting outside the roost and picking off the occasional bat that came out. It wasn't eating the bat though, it obviously learnt to catch the bat, kill it. As it killed it, a couple more were flying out the roost, and it would go back and get it. Basically it created a pile of bats, because it obviously worked out that the bats are only going to be exiting there for so long, so it needs to kill as many as possible, to catch as many as possible in short periods of time. So just kill them, leave them, come back for them later. Other ones, down Wigton, over down Dumfries and Galloway, there's also a video on YouTube, I believe it's still there, of a gull doing exactly the same, just catching them as they come out the roost. Not very pleasant, but it happens. But other things that have been known to do it, I think it was caves in France, I want to say great tit, it could be blue tit, but I think it was great tits, were actually going in and finding hibernating bats, and they were after some protein, and basically they were pecking the heads and eating the brains of the bats. Again, not very pleasant, sorry, but quite interesting. So you don't really think of, small birds like that actually being predators, but they are. I mean, not just of insects, but of actually small mammals. So yes, so it's now just starting to get to a nice. It's still quite light out, but pipistrelles come out about 20 minutes or so before sunset. Or now, I think sunset, is about 7 o'clock at the minute. Although it's still quite light, the official sunset it stays quite light after official sunset. So I'm expecting. Sorry, I've just seen a sparrowhawk just going through. After me saying sparrowhawks will still be active at this time of night. One's just going through there. I think it's a female. She was in. Well, I assume it's her because it was a pigeon. Was eaten in my garden a couple of days ago. So just before, I've got sort of like the bats will appear. They will appear, honestly. Just a couple of things. One is if you're this is obviously a one-off event, but I do also do other sort of events, training courses and workshops and stuff like that. So I don't know how you can see that. That's my Facebook, Twitter and Instagram account, Graeme B. Wilson, and is that when. Oh, I really hate sort of like this. Is that showing backwards? Oh, I hate the way that sort of it flips that. Anyway, I don't know whether I can do that. Flip it back. I think I've actually just done that. Yes. Yeah. Haha. Right, Graeme B. Wilson. Hopefully this is working now. Right way. So Graeme B. Wilson. I'm always happy to take any questions anyone's got, or to help out with any sort of wildlife advice or anything like that. I'm an ecologist, wildlife educator, and also independent wildlife rehabber. And I do some sort of freelance, sort of like voluntary projects and that. So if this is a free event and there's no pressure here at all, if you went to, there's a my links link on this here, and it was also in the advert for this. If you look on that, there's I've got sort of various things. You can either sort of like make a donation to my wildlife project through the crowdfunder, or buy something off my Amazon wish list. One's for wildlife rescue, and the other one's just a general wildlife one that I would use for sort of like training purposes, or buy me a coffee, or just send me something through PayPal. But as I say, no pressure at all. So I'm hoping that we're going to be seeing a bat very soon. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I normally cover during a bat walk that I don't. Well, actually, one thing I say is if you follow either Graeme B. Wilson or My Wildlife Year, this is my project that I've actually got going all year. I'm producing a weekly video which goes on YouTube and also IGTV of what I've been up to every week. Not just what I've been up to, but also I've started a new bit in wildlife myth busting. I also do, sort of like cover bits of equipment, or maybe do a review of a new book that I've got. So yeah, if you follow My Wildlife Year or Graeme B. Wilson, you'll also see sort of various videos and photos I've put up of wildlife, including things like wildlife rescue that I do. So chonky, there's a few pictures of the chonky munching the mealworms and stuff like that. Sometimes, obviously, you have to be aware that if I take something in, sort of like for rehabbing, you don't always make it. Someone's asked a question, where's the best place to put a bat box in the garden? That's a good question, actually, and I haven't covered that. Right. Best place is something I've already mentioned, is away from cats. So somewhere where cats can't sit right near that. If you're going to get a bat box, make sure that the gap is quite small. If you look at the gap and think, oh, a bat will never fit in there, it's the right size. If you make it too big, even sort of like as big as that, I don't know whether you can tell how big that is actually in the camera. Small things like wrens will get in there and make nests in it. So note that. Also, don't have anything that if you buy a bat box, don't get one that has a perch or a landing platform. I've seen ones that sort of like, you know, they're sort of like down like that, but then have a landing platform for the bat coming out. Bats don't take off from the flat, they actually need to drop to take off. So you want somewhere that's high enough to sort of like maybe good couple of metres, maybe 2.5 to 3 metres. Even higher is, you know, is ideal. Somewhere where they can drop down away from cats that might get them in that, and don't put it somewhere that's going to get the sort of like the majority of the sun. Sort of somewhere sort of like, you know, from west, sort of like west facing or east facing, somewhere that might get some sun during the day but not south facing. That would just make it too warm. You could actually put one sort of like southeast, southwest and north facing on a tree, and that round a tree, and what you might find is that some of them would actually be used throughout the year at different times. If you've only got one, you want to put it up just somewhere that's not, as I say, not getting direct sun all the time. Get some sun during the day, but it's not going to overheat. And what you've got to remember is, once you've got bats in there, unless you've got a license, you cannot go and disturb them, so you can't look in there. And that actually even includes during the winter. Even though they're not there, it still classifies as a bat roost, even if the bats are absent. So don't go nosing about in there, or certainly, you know, and don't go posting on social media that you've done it. That's a big no-no. So yeah, it's just sort of, I hope that's helpful. I hope that's sort of like, I'm trying to think if there's any other way. If you're going to go for a bat box, we've went away, when I was sort of like, you know, first getting into conservation, it was sort of like blue tits or sort of boxes were the way to go, sort of like rather than with a hole at the front, a slit at the back. But now it's more sort of thinner ones, because pipistrelles are incredibly loving bats. And I'm going to stop talking now and switch on my bat detector, because they finally turned up. I'm going to turn that into 50. Raven, let me know if that answered your question, or if it didn't, just let me know. So these, I don't know how you can hear there, they're making a nice noise, but if I turn it up to 20, you can hear it became really loud. Now, I don't know whether you heard that little buzz there, little electronic buzz. I just describe it as a electronic fart. There is another one there. That was sort of noise, electronic sort of little raspberry. There's one there, and that's called a feeding buzz. So these general clicks are the echolocation, but the feeding buzz is them going in to overdrive. So that's them. They've got a prey in sight. So there's at least 3 here that I can see. Flying around. Now I'm going to turn the bat detector down to 20 and see if you can. Now I'm going to turn it off for a second, because I'm not going to talk while I've got it down at 20, because it actually interferes with my voice. So my voice interferes with it. So yeah, there is 3 up there, but I'm turned it down to 20. Listen for any loud clicks. They're social calls. I'll turn it back up to 55. Those loud clicks you heard there, those are the social calls, so that's them. They're actually using their voice. This is quite a hard one to get your head round. They're using their voice not only to see where they're going, but to communicate at a different frequency. So that's like us, sorry, I've got a midge, I'm going to have to stretch my hands. Oh! That came quite close to me. Sorry, I got distracted there with them coming so close and me scratching my hand to the midges. What was I saying? I can't remember what I was saying. It'll come to me in a second. Oh yes, aha. So they're using their social call. They're using the voice both to talk to each other and to see where they're going. Now, to try and explain it to you, that's like walking down the street, you using your eyes to look where you're going, but also if you see someone, to look at them and to also communicate with them with your eyes at the same time as looking where you're going with your eyes. It's kind of a metaphor that doesn't really work, but it's the best one I can come up with. So yeah, it's a bit quiet. I'm going to take a wee walk down to the bridge underneath. So I'm going to leave here just now. I'm just checking I haven't left anything. So there's actually quite a few flying about over there. That's a rookery over there. So they're flying about above me. But I'm hoping if we go down here, we'll get some nice footage under the bridge. So you can see it's actually still quite light and there's bats out and about. It's amazing how people have a there's a bat there. So I'm getting a bit, I'm having to watch where I'm going because I'm going downstairs, so trying to keep the camera, the bat detector, and also not end up skiting down on my bum. I'm on the flat ground now. So we're coming right up to the bridge here. You'll hear once we go under the bridge, if any bats come through here, you can actually hear probably the none are actually coming through. It's quite amazing the noise they make when it's echoed. But a little wander along this way. I'm really lucky to live in such a place like this where it's hoaching with wildlife. I mean, I've never known somewhere with as much bat activity as here. It's went down, it calms down a bit at this time of year, but a month ago it was just sort of like, absolutely crazy. But it's still got loads of bats around. Just going down to the river. The river is amazingly low at the moment. And it has been for quite a while. I'm just seeing that was me putting the bat detector near the phone. We're still too early for the Benton Bats in the river. They come out a bit later when it gets a bit dark, which makes it a bit harder to see them. And they sound. They get a sort of crackly sound rather than a sort of clicky sound. Crackly sound. But I usually down here get a few pipistrelles flitting about, sort of like round the trees at the side. But not at the moment. This bit, I don't know whether you can see this sort of like structure that's coming up. It's the old footbridge across the Teviot before that big bridge there was built. There's actually a footbridge, and basically all that's left is the two sort of like towers on either side. And it literally was just sort of foot traffic. That's, it's not exactly very thick. There's a bat flying about here. Sorry about that feedback. Trying to manoeuvre. That's quite high. Yeah, that's louder. It's high pitched because I had it down at 45. I was talking about the Bentons and I turned it down to 45 out of habit. So bats, they'll fly. This one here you can actually see just is flying round and round here. It'll be coming out there in a second. There it is. It flies round, and is it going to come out there? Is that it? Oh, there it is again. Yeah. Oh, it's double back in itself. So they're quite creatures of habit. So they'll quite often they'll fly around. Actually, talking about walking, they can crawl very fast. Bats on the ground, but they need to climb up somewhere high, and get a bit of a drop to be able to take off. A couple of bats can, like brown long-eared, if they sort of flap their wings enough, they can sort of get enough height. They're sort of like basically using their wings to push themselves up. But it's they really can't take off from a standing start. Even if you're listening to this and you're in a town or a city, there'll still be bats around you. I've done bat walks in both Glasgow and Edinburgh, and there's always bats around somewhere. So you never know when they're going to turn up. But you know, I've had nocturnal bats fly over me in towns and cities, and also in rivers and canals. I've had the Bentons, had plenty of soprano pipistrelles with the occasional common. I think we've found another little hot spot here. I wonder. This is obviously quite a nice wee area for them to be flying about. Up here is the local school, which I know is also got quite a hive of activity of pipistrelle bats and other wildlife too. So I've just been hawthorned in the head, nearly lost my hat. Right, good question. Does the bat detector fight the bats themselves? No! Basically because we can't hear the bats, and we can hear the bat detector because it brings down the sound, their calls down to a level that we can hear it, a frequency we can hear it. So it's not really something that they can hear. Even if they can't hear it, it's just got to be like background noise to them. So yeah, you can buy bat lures, and you need a license to use one of these, but you can buy a bat lure that basically emits a noise that will attract bats, but you really obviously don't want to be doing that, you know, unless there's a scientific need for it and you need a license to do it. So the detectors basically, they don't care about noise. I've done bat walks, in-person bat walks, with groups of 200. You know, I do them up in Edinburgh for an organisation. And I had 200 people turn up, some of them are 200 plus, and had kids running about with bat detectors, chasing the bats as they fly across the parkland. Bats are just busy eating away at their dinner. I suppose actually if it would be their breakfast, if they'd just got up, so eating their breakfast. Yeah, they don't care about the noise that we make. But one thing we have to watch out for is if there is a bat roost somewhere, we don't. I've just realised this is quite dark, this, because I'm walking through, but this is the school next to me, and I can hear some bats in there. Let's go in there. Yeah, there is light. If there's a bat roost, we don't want light on the roost, because that can actually make them think that it's still daylight outside and stop them coming out earlier than they'll be coming out later than they should be. So you don't want to be shining lights or putting up new lights that are shining on the bat roosts potentially. So after me saying that the school grounds are normally poaching with bats. I'm not hearing anything. Right. So, what I'll do is I'll walk round to the green, village green, and see whether there's any there, and then I'll start to finish up. But if anyone's got any more questions, please do ask away in the comments. I hope I haven't missed any. So, sorry about that bright light there, street light. Sorry I went quiet. I'm sort of looking out because I thought there would be some bats flying about in this field next to these trees, but not. Yeah, there's, going back to bat boxes, there's a couple of sort of ones that you can get. Ones are some are flat, quite flat ones, and others are wedge shaped, but they're both good for pipistrelles because they're credistrel bats. And that's something I haven't talked about, is where bats might be, where the favourite roosts are. It depends on the species. Something like the brown long-eared likes a nice area to warm up in before it flies off. So somewhere like a barn, or a big loft or a church building, they like to warm up their wings. Trying to see where. Oh, it's over this garden here. Whereas other bats will just sort of are quite happy in holes in trees, in old buildings. But the pipistrelles love new builds. Basically they love cavities, and new builds have cavity walls and also gaps underneath the sort of the roof, especially in Scotland. You're very much in houses in Scotland will have sort of solid wooden roofs with tiles in the top. Quite often further south that's not the case. So in Scotland they'll be roosting under slates and tiles, and also under the eaves. So yes, so they also roost underground, especially in winter, in old mines and in caves, but also old buildings, old ruined castles. I did a bat walk last night at Norham Castle, and during the summer there's roosting bats up in the top of the castle, but in the bottom they also roost during the winter. They hibernate down there. So it's went quite quiet. I'm hoping that once we get down into the green, I've done bat walks in the green before, so hopefully we'll get some flying about here. I'm really lucky to live in a sort of lovely village that's actually got a big village green. It's a bit sort of like something out of a TV show. The big village green with corner shop, a hotel. Told you we get bats in the village green. There always is. So it's it's nice to see You know, so many bats around. As I say, there's a few less because we're getting sort of, it's basically breeding season, and they're getting busy, and they'll be feeding out, thinking about feeding for hibernation as well. But this time a month ago, there was a lot more bat activity, but we're still seeing a fair bit. So I'm almost home. I've done a big loop. I started about 100 yards from home, and I've now done a big loop, and we're back to home. So I hope you found this an enjoyable one. I've never done a Facebook Live. I might again. It hasn't been a totally horrendous experience for me. But I'll just just be reminded that if you want to, you can follow me on social media or follow my wildlife here, and I'll just go have a seat, sit down. Right, so it still looks really light over there, but it's a trick of the light in here. So just let the bus pass by. So yes, so feel free to follow me on social media, and follow my wildlife here. And as I say, I'll do other sort of events. Some are free, some are training workshops where there's a cost involved. But yeah, and I'm always happy to answer questions at any point. So feel free to get in touch. There's no charge for answering questions, so please feel free to get in touch. So I'll bid you all good night, and hope you've enjoyed your evening. And it's something that I've actually quite enjoyed as well. So I might do this again sometime. Don't know whether it'll be bats or whether it'll be something else. Okay, take care. Have a good rest of the weekend, and stay safe, and enjoy the wildlife that's around you. Cheers, bye.